I'm asking, do you think that the Mavericks should deal Dennis Smith Jr.?
This is an interesting conversation. As a Knicks fan, we always face questions of should we have drafted Dennis Smith Jr. over Frank? And my answer to that was always, well, Dennis Smith Jr. seems to have a higher ceiling, and I realize he's much more exciting. However, a highly athletic point guard who's a little bit undersized isn't a dynamite shooter, and you could pretty much call a bad playmaker, is not necessarily something I want on my team. So even if Frank is a lesser player, I would rather have a defensive role player who hits open shots than a higher usage, inefficient, athletic guy going forward. That's just me, because I don't see Dennis Smith Jr. turning into Russell Westbrook or John Wall. And he doesn't have the skills to be Kyrie Irving or Dame. So that having been said, in Dallas's position, they see this guy every day over the past few years. Oh, as a caveat, and this goes for anytime you guys watch the show, know that my opinion on young point guards is they need 4 to 5 years before you know what they are. So they can look really, really good and not turn out so great. They can look really, really bad and turn out much better than you thought. So keep this in mind. But you still have to make decisions because they might be turning the corner right as their contract is about to come up. They might be, everybody thinks they're going to turn into something and you think they're not. And that goes to where the Dallas Mavericks might be. Everybody thinks Dennis Smith Jr. is going to turn into Russell Westbrook with a slightly better jumper and maybe less passing. That's what most people think, right? It's going to be this high-flying guy, dunking on people all the time, running up and down the floor. But I don't know if that's the case. And I think Dallas doesn't know if that's the case. And if everybody else thinks that means his trade value is as high as it's going to be. Because playing next to what appears to be the superior player in Luka Doncic, and more importantly, the superior point guard in Luka Doncic, even though he's technically not playing that position, that allows you to do is to get a George Hill, Pat Beverly 3-and-D guy at the 1 and use Luka as your primary ball handler and have him as your main decision maker going forward. So do I think they should? I can't say should because I'm not there seeing what they see every day. But I do think it's very possible that this is the best possible time to trade him because he might the warts might show more and lower his value in the future. Whereas right now, you might get exactly the player that you want for Dennis Smith Jr. And people will say you got robbed, and it'll turn out it was the other way around a few years down the line. Or maybe it'll be good for both teams.
Yeah, I think that they should definitely move him. I think that a lot of times people look at team building almost the way they look at team building is if they were playing like NBA 2K, right? So in their minds, they say, well, you just get a bunch of good players. You get 5 good players and you have a good team. That's just how it goes. And if this guy's not better than this guy, then why would you trade him for him? But that's not the way you build a team. That's not a way you build a lineup. Guys have to fit. And if the Mavericks can move Dennis Smith Jr. to a squad where they are able to get who is technically man for man, maybe a lesser shooting guard than Dennis Smith Jr. is, a point guard or a combo guard or whatever, but that guy fits better with Luka Doncic, then that's the right deal. Or if you're able to get assets or draft assets or what have you, or you're able to get some assets that allow you to put together another deal to get that kind of a guy, then that's fine. Or if you already have a 2 guard on the bench who plays well with Luka Doncic, then that's the way you build a team. So while I believe in Dennis Smith Jr. as a player, I do worry about injuries because he's had a torn ACL already in his career and in his college career. I've seen firsthand what happens with athletic point guards around his size who play, the style of game that he plays. He's not quite as he doesn't seem to put quite as much torque on his lower body as Derek did, but he does it. You can look at him and you can kind of get a little Derek flashback every once in a while, and that can scare you, if because you're wondering. And then he's already torn his ACL. You know what I mean? So that part of it definitely factors in. So that actually leads into what you were talking about letting him play long. The longer you let him stay with you, the more chance it is that he hurts his trade value. So you don't want to wait until he sucks throughout this season. And then now people start to have doubts. And now, say, for instance, the pool of suitors were this big. And now he starts to play poorly, and then the pool comes to this big, and the only people that are left are the people who really, really loved him out of college and just believe that he just needs another shot and just give me an opportunity to get him in this particular culture, and we can get him back to what he was or what he could have been. Then now that's when you start ending up getting much less back in return, and now you're not in a there's not a bidding war for him. There's only two people that'll take him type of a situation. And I don't think you want that. So while he's still very young, still on his rookie deal, so he's controllable for, I think this is the second year of the rookie deal. So next year he's guaranteed. And then the year after that, he's guaranteed under, as long as you pick up the team option. And then there's the qualifying offer because he will become a restricted free agent. So you got a good amount of time to evaluate him. And people may forget last year he averaged almost 16 points a game, as a rookie. And he averaged like 5 assists a game, like 3.5, 4 rebounds. This year the numbers have dropped playing next to Doncic.
And also if you watched him play last year, while he did have spikes of like, oh wow, he looks like a good player, most of it was not winning basketball.
Yeah,
projected. Like there's a lot of times guys get super empty numbers, and I think he was in such a situation where he had I think those numbers were pretty empty.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them empty, but you can't just say, oh well, he averaged this and then that's the end of it. That's the end all be all. But he definitely had games and he definitely had situations where you're like, oh, okay, this kid is, because the thing you got to do is you got to look at some of his best games, right? And you look at some of the best games, and the flat thing that you want to look, did they win? Did they win? Because the team that he played on last year was not an ultra super talented team. That's the reason they were in position to draft Luka Doncic again this year. So if you look at he played really big in some games that they won. And if you look at how what his production was, how those games went, you can tell that they won because of how he played in those games. And some of those most impressive games, in my opinion, were games that took place on the road, which to me is a really positive sign of where potential is. Does he still need coaching? Does he still need to learn how to be a point guard? Absolutely. But he's only 21 years old. Okay. So 21 years old, uber athletic. I still think that it's possible with the right coaching. I think a great place for him would be San Antonio. Because I know that he's going to get coached up in the right way in San Antonio. There's other places in the league where that can happen, but I think that he needs to play someplace like that. I'm not saying that if he stayed in Dallas and Luka Doncic never got there, that he wouldn't be a guy who could ultimately round into a right type of guard there. It wasn't as if he wasn't getting decent coaching there. Rick Carlisle's a coach.
Excellent coach.
So I think the maturation, we still, like you said, it does take some time for a point guard.
My problem with Dennis Smith Jr. that scares me is he does not seem to have the skills that he needs to be a great point guard. The skills that he has would be much better in a 3, but because I think athleticism is overrated if you're under 6'2".
But he's not, though. He's 6'3".
He's not a real 6'3", man. You watch him stand next to Russell Westbrook, he's smaller. Like he's a smaller guard. I don't know what his actual height is. He might be listed as 6'2".
He looks like he's about 6'2", 6'3" to me. I mean,
I think that's the
I
crucial
think he's
difference.
as legitimate of a 6'3" as Derrick Rose is.
Is Derrick Rose a legit 6'3"? I heard he was like 6'1" and change out of sneakers.
Derrick Rose was listed as 6'3".
Wasn't he measured at the combine as 6'2"?
He's probably like 6'2". He's probably like,
that was actually always my thing when people talked about Rose and Westbrook. I was like, Westbrook is bigger than Rose. He measured almost 6'4" out of shoes. And Derrick Rose measured almost 6'2" out of shoes, which is a big difference. And I do think, because my point with that is with Smith Jr., he has to jump really, really high to dunk on people. And he doesn't have the powerful frame to like post them up and body them on a consistent basis. He doesn't have a strength, size, physical advantage so that the athleticism is the icing on the cake, right? Sometimes you see like Westbrook's been doing the baby animation all year. Sometimes he's just posting guys up. He's just like, you're too small for me. He's just a massive guy. Like he's a big guy. Dennis Smith Jr. in NBA terms is not a big guard. He's a normal size guard. And at
the combine, he measured 6'3" in shoes.
In shoes.
Well, that's the only. But
that's what I'm saying. But I think that's the threshold. No, I think it does matter because that's the thing. Because you're looking at everything. You're looking at shoulder width. You're looking at weight. You're looking at wingspan.
But all of these heights are based on in shoes.
Let me finish my point. Because the things that contribute to you finishing in the lane are more than where your head is changed on where your sneakers are. And what I'm saying is Dennis Smith Jr. is exactly at that size where he has to use specifically the crazy jumping ability almost every time he goes up. And that's what's scary about him. He doesn't have the skill of a Kyrie or even Derrick Rose, young Derrick Rose. He had some ridiculous finishing talent in the lane. Dennis Smith Jr. doesn't have that kind of talent. He doesn't have the Kyrie Steph skill to throw up off balance, high arcing, different areas of the glass shots. His skill seems to mainly revolve around him jumping over you. My point with Westbrook is he's so big. He's bigger than Dennis Smith Jr. And he's so big that he gains an advantage before he jumps. Dennis Smith Jr. doesn't gain an advantage until he jumps. And until he develops other skills, that is a scary thing to look at that as potential. And I think people get overly enamored with it. Now, he is young, so he can develop those other things. But that's why my answer to this question was Dallas sees him every day. And if they're thinking of trading him, that means that they're probably seeing something similar to what I'm telling you. We have an average size guard jumping all the time, doesn't shoot great, doesn't pass great, doesn't play D. People think this guy's going to turn into Derrick Rose. Let's go ahead and cash in on that right now. And I think that might be the scenario you're looking at. I'm not writing him off because he's a young guard, and sometimes it takes a long time to click. But right now, the floor for Dennis Smith Jr. looks pretty scary. He looks like a backup guard.
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, in comparison, Derrick Rose in shoes was listed as 6'2.5".
Yes.
In shoes. Russell Westbrook was 6'3.5" in shoes. Dennis Smith Jr. is 6'3" in shoes. Russell Westbrook's wingspan was 6'7" 3/4. His standing reach was 8'4", which is pretty freaking significant.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty freaking significant. Now, oddly enough, Derrick Rose's wingspan is wider than Russell Westbrook's.
Doesn't surprise me actually, because Derrick Rose looks like a smaller person than Russell, but I think part of the reason he was able to finish so well was because of the wingspan.
And then Derrick Rose's shoulders are, he even
which is another factor that I was talking about.
Yeah, as a young man, the shoulders were big. But I guess my point is,
but Dennis Smith Jr. looks smaller like smaller. As when I say smaller, I don't mean shorter. I mean smaller.
Just a smaller. He's a small. Like it's almost like when you're
Logan.
talking about fighters. Like you see fighters get in the ring or in the cage, and you just look at one guy and it's like, man, he's a smaller guy.
Yeah.
You know,
like I think Trae Young is in that realm where people are like, they thought he was 5'11". Like you saw him on all of the shows when they were doing the draft. They were like, well, he's barely 6 feet tall. It's like, no, he actually measures at 6'2". He's actually 6'2", but he's just
a slightly built guy,
smaller. And I think, and that's my point with Dennis Smith Jr. is, in the open court, obviously he's going to do spectacular dunks, but in the half court, his athleticism is not. He doesn't have the other skills to make it the kind of benefit that I would really be excited about long term at this point in his development.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you kind of going against your own rule with the point guards by kind of summing him up a little bit too quickly.
I'm not summing him up. I'm saying this is where he is right now. Dallas sees him every day, and they have an opportunity to cash in on him when the view is a lot of people think he's going to turn into Derrick Rose. And if they think he's definitely not going to turn into Derrick Rose, then yes, you trade him now. Now, I think even if they made that thinking and they showed me all of their information and I said, this looks like a smart deal, I agree with it, that 3 years down the line, you could be wrong and the guy could still turn into Derrick Rose. I'm maintaining that. But does it look like he will at this particular point? No, it does not look like it.
I don't know. I think it's he's obviously in a different situation than Rose. He didn't happen to fall into the lap of the perfect coach for him with the perfect system for him. As a matter of fact, I would love to see Dennis Smith in Minnesota. I mean, Dennis Smith in Minnesota playing with Thibodeau, the way Thibodeau's offense and everything he does caters around small scoring guards. They all of them flourish when they play with him. They all do. And his teams usually overachieve. Usually.
Maybe the Bulls will trade him for Chris Dunn.
I've clearly, I've thought about that, but I don't think that I don't think that it works because Dunn is a ball dominant guy too, and that's not going to work with Luka. Luka needs to play with a guy who plays off of him.
Well, Luka needs to play with a guy who plays defense. That's the number one.
Because Luka tries, but he is the heart. Him and Kyle Korver are probably the worst defenders that I've ever seen that actually give effort.
Yeah, because they look like they wearing flippers,
cement socks.
Like you know what I'm saying? Like they just can't.
They give effort.
They running around in snowshoes, man.
They literally give effort, and they're still bad at it.
They can't do it. Everybody's much faster than they are. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they playing like the game is going at a whole different speed than what they can keep up with.
Yeah.
Like if I was Luka, I would just tell Luka never contest another shot at the rim because nothing good is going to happen.
Yo, he done got blasted like 8 times.
So many times this year. It's ridiculous.
Good credit to keep getting up, kid. That's what you do.
Keep trying.
But right now, there are a lot of really promising young guards in the league. I don't think Dennis Smith Jr. has played his way into that conversation yet. He's not in there with the De'Aaron Foxes and what's his name from Denver. Jamal Murray.
Right? And Jamal Murray's not even a point guard in my opinion.
I mean, but now there's Dennis Smith Jr.
I think Dennis Smith. Yeah, I don't know, but I think Jamal Murray is an outstanding 2 guard who can handle and can be a beautiful secondary ball handler. But I don't think your team's at its best if he's playing point guard. He's your starting 2 guard, but I don't think your team is better.
Denver's making do. I tell you that much.
Denver has a heck of a coach, and they also have a ridiculously talented and versatile big man who can take a lot of those playmaking responsibilities away. So that makes a difference.
Which goes back to what I'm saying about Dennis Smith Jr. is he's not a playmaker. So when you talk about moving him because Doncic needs the ball in his hands more. Okay.
I don't think it's that he needs his ball in his hands more. Doncic is going to get the ball, right? But in order for the team, the offense to be as efficient as it needs to be, they see Dennis Smith I don't think it's Doncic is not the problem, right? So you could give the ball to Dennis Smith, and then Doncic could be the secondary ball handler, and Doncic's a good enough shooter to play off of Dennis Smith. Now, will Doncic be doing everything that is, that fits him and lets him get to his potential? No, but he can still be effective. The problem is if you give the ball to Doncic, Dennis Smith's not effective at all playing off of him.
See, and this is what I'm saying. It's like, okay, so you don't have the raw finishing talent of a young Derrick Rose, and you don't have the skills of the smaller guards like not smaller, but the less athletic guards like Kyrie and Steph. You don't have the shooting. You're not a great passer. So that sounds like more of a really good backup guard.
But see, I don't
ideally like when I mean ideally like for a championship team.
See,
if
but
you
I don't
had
think
Dennis Smith Jr. coming off the bench, you'd be really happy. I'm not saying he's horrible. He's young. He's got to.
No, I'm saying I don't think he's horrible at those things that you're talking about, right? Like I don't think he's any less of a playmaker than Kyrie, right? But he's not. He doesn't have the beautiful handle, and he doesn't have he's not as good of a shooter as Kyrie, and he doesn't have quite as great of an understanding of angles when he's attacking the basket. But he's more athletic than Kyrie. He finishes at the rim better. He doesn't finish at the rim better.
Easy. We have a standard on this show, Brian.
He doesn't finish at the rim better than Kyrie. The only other non-athletic shooting guard that I've ever seen that finishes as well as Kyrie at the rim is Steph and Tony Parker.
Yeah,
those are the only ones. Kyrie, but Dennis Smith finishes at the rim. It's different than because he finishes all with power and athleticism. Kyrie finishes at the rim with finesse and skill and understanding where to put the ball on the glass. But I don't think the fall off is as significant to the point where like Dennis Smith can't develop as a playmaker. It's not that he can't get better as a shooter. I mean, he's a 35% 3-point shooter, which is much better than Derrick Rose was at this time of his career. Much better. Right. He's not as good a free throw shooter, which I think is huge.
Yes, very huge. Because you talk about a guy going to
get there. He's gonna get there. You got to make him though, bro. When you get to the line, you got to make him. And
here's when you say he's gonna get there. Here's the thing, because what we're talking about is going to a championship level. Because if Doncic is super young, plays up to his potential, which looks really high right now. And with a great coach and a great organization and some pieces around them already, you're talking about you want to make a push to be a playoff threat. You want to get to that level where you're in the second round of the playoffs with a chance to make it to the Final Four. And you want to get there relatively soon. In the next 3 years, you want to be having that conversation at some point. Next year would be ideal, but if you get there in 2 years, 3 years, that's fine. Okay. On that team, that's what Dallas is choosing. We're not talking about pie in the sky here. We're talking about nuts and bolts. On that team, is he the starting point guard without the defense, mediocre 3-point shooting, mediocre to below average playmaking, quite frankly? And you talk about getting to the rim and getting to the free throw line. Well, in a half-court set against a great defensive team night after night.
He doesn't get there as much as he needs to.
Right. And so that's and again, I'm predicating on this all on the fact that Dallas sees him every day. They train him. They know him. Everything I know about him is he's a great guy, great kid. So that means that purely on a basketball level, they're thinking, yeah, this doesn't fit. This doesn't work. And if that's the case, now is the time. Because trading him is going to be risky as long as he's under 25.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think we agree for different reasons. I don't have a bad feeling about his game yet. I to the point where I'm like, I have a bad feeling about the fit. I don't have a bad feeling about his game. And I think that's probably just where we differ in opinion there. But I'll be weak. I'm very unique.